Welcome to episode 73 of the Sports Geek podcast. On this week's podcast, I catch up with CEO of the Asian Cup Local Organising Committee, Michael Brown, to talk about the Asian Cup and his career in AFL and cricket.
Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host, who stopped his football career after one game with Mark Bosnick, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. It's actually Bosnich, not Bosnick. I'll actually put a link in the show notes, a picture in the show notes of when I did play that game with a couple of former Socceroos on Amy Park, or as it's going to be known during the Asian Cup, at the Melbourne Rectangular Stadium, due to the naming rights and things that happen with major events. My name is Sean Callanan, and you are listening to the Sports Geek podcast, hopefully sometime around Christmas. And if it's around Christmas in your part of the world, Merry Christmas from me. And get ready for another episode of the Sports Geek podcast. Thank you very much to people who have emailed and sent in iTunes reviews. Shout out to James Osborne sending an email and saying thanks. Really appreciate it. On this episode, I catch up with Michael Brown. He's the CEO of the Local Organising Committee for the Asian Cup and has a really interesting background in the world of sports business, being one man that's actually worked in three different sports. He started in AFL with Hawthorn, and then he spent a long time in the world of cricket. In the last 3 years, his world has been consumed on all things Asian Cup. It starts on January 9 down here in Australia, and it'll be one of the biggest football tournaments Australia has ever seen, that's for sure. So here is my chat with Michael Brown from Asian Cup. Very happy I'm at the Asian Cup, offices of the Asian Cup Organising Committee, coming to the Australian East Coast in January. I'm here with the Chief Executive, Michael Brown. Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast, Michael.
Thanks, Sean. It's great to have you in our building.
Yes. So we've just done a bit of a check-up for that final run-up to sell tickets. Do you want to tell us a little bit about, I always like to ask people at the start of their background in sport, and you've got a long history in sport and covering multiple sports. Do you want to take us back and how you got to this position?
Sure. Well, I'm old, so at 57 years of age, I'm old, so I've been around a long time. I was a school teacher for a long time. I taught year 11s and 12, was involved in physical education. I played VFA footy in the old days, and I was fortunate to play quite a number of games, and then played a lot of cricket, so I sort of traditionally got involved in sport. And then because I worked at a very strong AFL school, I was very critical of the local club, which was then South Melbourne Football Club. That's how long ago it was. And I kept saying, you can do better, and one day they said, well, you should come and help us. So I helped part-time in recruiting, and I eventually got better known in the AFL circles. And I always wanted to step out of teaching when the time was right, and the opportunity came to go to North Melbourne, where I worked part-time, so I went there full-time. Unfortunately, it lasted about 3 years, and they ran out of money, so I lost my job. I left there, went to work for a company called Tobin Brothers, ended up as general manager. It was a fantastic experience, wonderful people. Then, because I'd kept my interest in sport, I got approached by the Hawthorn Footy Club. They were just post the merger. They were struggling down their knees. Seemed like a good challenge. I was 40 years of age and up for it. So I went there to be CEO and then stayed 6 years, and it was a fabulous time. It was a financially build strength of the club. We moved took games to Tasmania. We moved from Waverley Park. So we underwrote the financial security of the club.
And it was a real membership focus at that time to sort of, build up Hawthorn. From, for people who are listening, either, outside of Australia, Hawthorn almost went through a merger and, on its knees, this might be a bit dramatic, but, really
certainly on its knees. And the only thing we had, because we were almost an external city club, we were sort of an hour from the city centre. We had 2.1 million people living in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, and all of the other AFL venues were in the city. So we turned Waverley Park, it was known as Arctic Park. I played there in my football days, and it was horrible. We turned into a family club.
Yeah.
We focused on our young players, blonde hair, good-looking guys, short shorts, and we found that the community started to come behind us. Even if you weren't a Hawthorn supporter, the fact you could go and watch an AFL game, you were welcome. And so we got to 30,000 members. We're the first AFL club to 30,000 members, and it was all done on an old 386 computer, if you remember that.
Yep.
And the guys in reception used to be people queued up out the door with this one computer as the guy was inputting, and I just said, take the money, just take the money. They'll ring us or they'll find us if they've given us the money. So It was an amazing time, and now, and I think there I saw the value of connecting with your members. Because they'd been through a merger, they were very, very, very alert and had been scarred, and so they were very engaged. So getting volunteers was never a problem. Going out to the database, talking to them, these were the very early days of database management, but yeah, it was a wonderful time. So I went from there to cricket, got approached by James Sutherland to go over and look after, be his deputy and look after all the Australian cricket team. So I looked after all the players, the coaches, basically ran the operations arm, everything from travel. And then after I'd done 10 years, I was Ben Buckley, who was then the CEO of soccer, or Football Federation Australia, rang me up and said, I'd really like you to come and run this thing called the Asian Cup. And I said, look, I'm not really interested. I settled in what I'm doing. He said, well, come and meet Frank Lowy, who's a very, very well-known, wealthy, amazing businessman here. And I thought, well, I'd never met Frank. Here's a chance to, I'll come to Sydney because it was an hour away. I'll come as a courtesy, meet Frank and then go home. And all Frank kept saying to me when I met him in the 20 minutes I spent with him was, what are you scared of? What are you scared of? What are you scared of? Do you know what this is going to do for Australia? Do you know what it's going to do for football? So I got on the plane, I drove back in the taxi back to the airport, and I rang my wife and said, what are we scared of? This is a 3-year opportunity, new city, great lot of fun, and it's been an amazing journey. And we're 28 days from the event opening, so it's been exciting.
And so, take us through those, I guess some of the mechanics of being a local organising committee, because you're effectively managing everything for the tournament. Like I said, it is a 3-year gig, and I've spoken to people who manage things for the Olympics and big tournaments, and it's all in the planning, and then you have this short period where the event happens. What were some of the first things that you had to do, coming into the role of the Asian Cup?
I think importantly, I needed to work out what did we stand for. What were we trying to do? And I likened it to being a ship's captain. That you don't see your destination for 99% of your journey, but you know where you're going. So you've got to chart your course. So when I started, there was 2 other people. One girl, Jane Fernandez, had come across from FFA, and there was a lawyer who'd been seconded into FFA and given to us because this was a government-funded event and a massive number of contracts. To deal with both operationally and at a government level. So when we wanted meetings, I had an office that was 2 metres by 2 metres. We just would sit around the table, turn around and talk to each other because we didn't need to schedule, didn't need a calendar scheduler. And now we're 140, 150 staff, 5 locations, 1,300 volunteers. It's massive. So, but really importantly was to work out our vision. And as you can see up on the wall, it's about understanding what we wanted to do. So we wanted to put on a world-class event. We wanted to make sure we celebrated Asia's rich cultural football history and, of course, leave a legacy for the game. So once we worked that out, we were then able to work out a strategic plan, and we did a very simple strategic plan that then layered itself. And then the one thing you've got to do with events is you just build a timeline, and you then build a series of models that fit into a master schedule. That is all the things you need to do. And that measures day by day, week by week, month by month. So even today, we've still got probably 60 outstanding issues to deal with the next 28 days. We had something like 20,000 3 years ago. So that gives you a sense of focus. And it's been amazing. I've really enjoyed it. I'm excited. I wish it was on now. We're ready to go. But it'll come around quick enough. And with 28 days to go, we're now just double-checking that we deliver on the things that we promised to deliver and that people engage. So it's been an amazing journey. I've enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun. I've worked across AFL. I've worked across cricket. I've now worked in the World Games, soccer. So what's next? We'll see what comes around the corner.
Yep. And so what have been some of the challenges, I guess, both in the role, but then also running a tournament like this in, like you said, all the contracts, setting up the stadiums, having all the federations that are coming into play. What have been some of the challenges so far? Without
doubt, the biggest challenge has been stakeholder management. You have some key groups. The event is government funded, so we've got 4 state governments and a Commonwealth government who all want to be part of the pie. I was given the task of, which I didn't know I had to do, but I had to put a funding agreement together. No one told me about it. And actually, the guy who employed me, and when I said I was disappointed I had to do that, he said, well, if I told you never would have come. And to try and get 5 governments to agree was challenging. It took 12 months, but we got there. The event is owned by the AFC, the Asian Football Confederation. That's a management tool in itself because they think this is the World Cup. This is the first time it's been out of mainstream Asia, so there's a nervousness. So managing their expectations, and they're naturally conservative by nature. And then, of course, managing the football family and getting people to realise that this is, pardon the pun, but a $61 million free kick.
Yep.
If you add the $30 million with the ticket sales, you sort of give or take a $100 million event. So you've got an incredible opportunity to maximise your sport in this space. So what are you going to do about it? And of course, most soccer clubs are under-resourced, relied on for opportunity to do things other than run their teams. So getting them to understand, and of course, you had A-League clubs, you had W-League clubs, and you've got member federations who run the sport in each state. You needed to get them all inside the tent, and that's probably been my biggest job over the last 3 years, is to manage stakeholders, to be the face of the organisation so that people can come to you. And, I think it's been a good model, but it's been hard work. It's not slow.
So again, for people who are outside Australia, it is the first time it's in Australia. The A-League, which is Australia's version of the MLS. If for people listening in the US, it's gonna pause for 3 weeks while the Asian Cup is on. And from my side of things, working with Matt and Luke and the team from a digital point of view, it was really an awareness thing, because outside the football family, the Asian Cup doesn't have a big visibility. And so the challenge was, and it's been your challenge for a couple of years now, is to make people aware that this is a big deal tournament. The Socceroos, performed well at the World Cup without getting a win, but caught the hearts of the nation and that kind of stuff. But to be able to see them on the home soil, but also the best in Asia, there's a sense, and just from my polling of people, that they go that they don't realise how big this tournament is, and it's really going to sneak up.
I think that's right. That if soccer's an emerging sport in Australia. Obviously, in Australia we have cricket, we have AFL, we have rugby league, the big ones, rugby union, or rugby as they call it. It's also quite big, but mainly in New South Wales and Queensland. But soccer is just on 10 years old now, so it's just starting to be in a growth phase. Been some really strong rivalries. Soccer is built on this East versus West, or derbies as they call it.
Yep.
So some of those in Melbourne and each of the key states have been really important. So this comes at a really good time to join that wave of enthusiasm. And I've always said that football, soccer as we call it here in Australia, should never drive to be the only and the best sport in the country. It should be aimed to sit at the table alongside the other sports, and it's got to work to do that. But some very positive things happening. Cricket's been around for 100 years, AFL's been around for 100 years, so it's 10 years old. So what I'm seeing is I think it's heading in the right direction. And this opportunity, because people don't understand the way soccer works. In normal AFL season is like the Premier League. It's You just play each other and there's a winner at the end of it all. This is a knockout phase. You've got to qualify, and so it's been an education program. And of course, 2.5 years ago, I'd be knocking on people's doors and they'd say, "Oh, well, when is it?" It's in 2015. I'll come back in 2 years. I'll find a story for you. So it was a real challenge. Whereas now we get really good media take up, but you're still educating.
Yeah.
You're educating particularly the Anglo-Saxon market, who've traditionally followed those sports, to say, "Oh, look at that sport. We should try that." Whereas we've worked hard in the multicultural space to get involved, because and we've now got over 200 multicultural ambassadors across the 5 host cities, and they are Iraqis, Iranians, Japanese, Chinese, Arabic, Uzbekistani, Omanian. They are people who love this game of football and are so keen to get involved. So they've been amazing in getting multicultural communities to connect with the event. And then, of course, with 25% of our population born overseas, there's a natural bent towards football. And this is the biggest sport in Asia. The participation rates by 2020 are reckoned to be 380 million people will be playing football in Asia. So it is the biggest team sport by that far. And so for us to be hosting it is a great honour, and we need to make sure that, we want to put on the best event ever, but we hand it back with the respect that it deserves.
Yeah, and that's, part of the focus, and we were just talking about ticketing before then, one of the phrases I love that came through in one of the podcasts is getting cheeks on the seats. That's pretty much, you've got to do that for all the games across, Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney, Canberra, Newcastle, get them all right. We just went and did all this, the Facebook segmenting, so I know all the team, I know all the cities and what we're targeting.
It's interesting that people say to me, "Well, how do you know it's been a success?" Well, there's lots of measures, from budget control to does it make a profit? Had all the stakeholders. There's all of that sort of stuff, but the person who will see it most is the person in the media or the person who's a spectator. And if you haven't got cheeks on seats, it's been a flop.
Yep.
So, everything, we're realistic. We're not going to get 70,000 people to Uzbekistan versus North Korea.
Yep.
But we're aiming to get 8,000 to 10,000 to those, call them smaller games, and then, of course, full houses for the Socceroos. And that's the way it's panning out.
Yep.
So it's a really interesting dichotomy of ideas that come together to put it on. But it's been it'd be, as I say, when I leave this job, I'll be very sad if all we've done is put on 32 games of football in 23 days. We need to leave a legacy. We need to make sure that the game is engaged and the game has been taken forward because of this event.
I mean, I was at a whole of football, I can't get that right, whole football plan with David Gallup in Melbourne recently, and this dovetails into that story and how it grows. And if all the kids out there playing, they should be wanting to see the Socceroos, but with the high caliber of other teams, they will be going to those other games to soak in that experience. And Australia overall loves running events, whether it be the Sydney, looking back at the Sydney Olympics to big events. We just love to soak that up, and I think that's the opportunity that Asian Cup offers. Yeah,
and I think all of our thinking has been about getting people into stadiums. At ticket prices, we've deliberately gone with a model that is family friendly, $15 an adult, $5 a child. So for $40, you can go to world class entertainment. So we didn't want to put barriers in the way. It's not about making a profit. It's about engaging people. So that, and I've always said the best way to get a consumer is to build a participant.
Yep.
You don't have to have played, but if you've been around the game, you might have scored, umpired, refereed, you've been around the game, you're more likely to come back to it if you don't stay with it.
Yep.
Further down the track. So, building consumers is then databases, is then customers, is people to talk to. That's been my model all along. It's been positive. We've got a long way to go, but it's so far been very positive.
Oh, well, if you haven't got your tickets yet, go to I'll put the links in the show notes, but if you haven't seen one of the ads that we're running, then Matt and I aren't doing our job right. But go to the Asian Cup website and check it out, and then we'll retarget you with ads to make sure you do buy a ticket. So I did want to touch on a sadder note, with your history both with Cricket Australia and the Tobin brothers. You were called by James Sutherland after Philip Hughes passing away and the tragedy there to sort of help pull together and organise the funeral. Do you want to sort of take us through a little bit about, how that touched the cricket community and I guess your role in that?
Yeah, sure. I knew Philip from my time in cricket. We were super close, but he was mischievous young lad who seemed to get into a few little scrapes that were harmless, but needed straightening out. And Michael Clark I worked with very closely because we had a structure where James worked with a captain, because CEO and captain, and
Yep.
I worked with Michael, and so we became really, really dear friends. James is a great friend of mine. Even though I left cricket, I did 10 years, and so he rang me a couple of days after Philip was hit and said, "You got any advice for me?" And I said, "Well, look, I don't know what the outcome will be, but if things don't go the way you want them to go for all of us, and anything happens to Philip, you need to be organised because he's from a small country town, 7,000 people at Maxville. This will be massive. It's a huge story, as we saw around the world. Put out your bats. The way the Australian and the international sporting community, I think in general communities, not just sport, came together was remarkable. So, and I said, you just need to be organised because it'll be a smaller arrangement with a local funeral director. And if I think I know what's going to happen because I'd arranged David Hooks, who was an international cricketer who died. We had it at the Adelaide Oval, which was 25,000, 30,000 people. You'll need to be organised. So I then had to go to Manila. So I flew to Manila that night, had a meeting the next morning, and then flew straight back late at the afternoon. So I was pretty tired when he rang me on the Saturday morning and said, "Look, I've been talking to Michael Clark, and we want you to help out and sort of be our person on the ground because there's going to be a lot of outpouring. Someone's got to manage the process." Well, I didn't know how big it was going to be, but it was originally going to be in a school gymnasium with 2 basketball, so it gives you some idea of the size. So I flew up to Sydney. I flew up to Maxville, met the family and who I knew, but they were very welcome. Tragic, absolutely. They were shattered, and I sort of got them on the thinking of, what do you want to do? Tell me what's in your head about how you want to do this, because I know the gym. I'd seen it. What do you want it to do? Well, we want the Australian cricket team, and we want it to be a celebration. So really, it was just a sort of starting with an embryonic stage, and then, of course, then Channel 9 wanted to telecast it, Channel 7, I think, telecast it. There were radio stations, there was print media. There was almost a small event of international media stretched down the width of the street, which was just quite remarkable.
Yeah.
And the outpouring was amazing. And so we had nearly 500, I think, people from the cricket family of the Australian team, all the state teams, representatives of his grade club, his local club, descend on Port Maxwell. And then you had all the media and all the commentators and all the journalists. So it became a sort of media event. So what I said to the funeral director, you worry about the family, and I'll manage everything else. So yeah, it was an honour to be asked. Incredibly sad, but you just know that you're helping out by getting it organised and structured. So I had some ideas about where I wanted to sit people. I wanted half the I call it funeral chapel. So I wanted half the chapel to be local people, and half to be cricket, so that cricketers didn't just hoggle the front rows. That his friends and family could be there, and that's how it worked out. And pretty proud of the way we turned the hall out. We washed it to within an inch of its life. Everything, we had cleaners in cleaning vents and all the cobwebs that get caught up in school gymnasiums, painted things and put up. Got the family select a range of pictures. And then of course we added beautiful flowers that were just a great tribute to him. And it was a great honour, and deeply moved. And it was it hit me most as I was driving back to the airport after the funeral that it had happened, and then I just really struggled for a few days. But
I mean, it is something that's quite valuable to have someone that can have that clear head and help guide, because the people that are so close to it, they can't think straight.
And it's not their job to do that. So to have, and I'm by no means an expert. I just had a reasonable idea of I needed to talk to the family. I had Megan, his daughter, help me to say, what do you want it to look like? You tell me and I'll make it happen. And had a great team of people from Cricket Australia. They did all logistics. So we had television screens. We had 4,500 people up on a school hill. We had, I think, 1,600 or 1,800 people in the hall on an incredibly hot day. Everybody went off to a tea. So look, it was a great honour, as I say. And I often talk in the funeral business that grief's not a journey. It's a journey, not a destination. People think that you'll be better as soon as the funeral's over. Well, no, you've got the next rest of your life. Your life changes. So I've talked to the family a couple of times since, and they're just dealing with that now. It's just over a week ago. Tragic.
And we're seeing that now with the players finally playing, and reading about David Warner. Trying to have 3 net sessions in a row and just not being able to get through, and then to walk out and do what he did on the pitch, and the courage that Michael Clark has shown not only at the funeral, but then when he's gone out and led the team out, it's the best tribute that they could do to Philip.
I think the thing that struck me was how university-liked he was. Most people have a sort of yin and yang. Some people like, some people don't, but he was a mischievous young fella. He was only 25 years of age. And, you don't expect to be burying kids at 25 years of age. The sporting community gathered, then the communities gathered around the world, and to see tributes that, the Put Out Your Bats thing, the 408, the hashtag 408, you couldn't help but, sport does. I was talking to Gil McLaughlin about this the other day, that, I asked him, what did you think? He said, I don't think any other sport could have done what cricket did. Because it's a national icon as a sport. The AFL are team-based. Soccer is probably not mature enough yet. Rugby is, again, in some states not as. Cricket is universal in our country, and universal in the Western world particularly. But it conducted itself with amazing charisma and charm and courage, or whatever you want to call it. But just the way that that guy who came up with that idea of Put Out Your Bats was all of a sudden around the world. You're seeing bats on soccer pitches. You're seeing bats on rugby pitches, you're seeing,
and even him, I was asked on Francis' show about that, and he was pretty much, he didn't want to talk about it. He was like, I just did it. I'm not talking about it, and he has since, after the funeral, and to show that respect. But it was something that was purely organic. Allowed everybody to show their respects.
It was a way of grieving. People, my wife, who would struggle to find my cricket bat from the years that I played, found my cricket bat, found a hat, and just put it at the back door, and didn't tell anybody. And I didn't know until I got home on the Thursday night And there was a group out there. And she's been around sport for a long time, but it just inspired her. I was talking to someone the other day who I used to work with, and she said she couldn't believe how overcome with grief she was. She's she's got 3 kids, but she said, I just couldn't cope with it. I just needed some way to so I went and got one of the kids' bats and put it outside.
Yeah.
We built a remarkable resilience and coping mechanisms to deal with tragic times, 9/11, Bali bombings, and sports. Sadly, you're not meant to die on a sporting field. So.
No. So thank you very much for sharing that. I know it's a very personal experience. So to finish up the Asian Cup, your main hopes for the Asian Cup in?
Well, 2 things. Obviously, the home team to do well. In any team-based sporting event needs the home team to do well. Look at Brazil, in the World Cup when they were winning, parties, celebrations, and we're by no means Brazil, but of course when they lost, the desolation of loss. So we want the Socceroos to do well because that naturally creates excitement. But it's a great time. It's the festival of football. It's January. It's our holiday time. Let's make Australia shine. We'll have television audiences in excess of 800 million people, and they'll be watching the games, yes, but they'll be seeing videos of Gold Coast, Melbourne, Sydney Harbour. Let's use it as an opportunity to connect on a trade and investment space because these are our biggest trading partners in the tourism space. But most of all, what we do really well is celebrating and smiling, and that's what the Asian Cup will be come 28 days from today.
Well, thank you very much for being on the podcast. I'll be definitely at some of the games down in Melbourne, and I might even make my way back up for the finals because it should be actually a really big celebration. And again, fingers crossed. I'm meeting with the FFA later today that Ange and the boys at the Socceroos do the right thing by you and get a few wins under their belt. But until then, have a good Christmas, and we'll see you at the Asian Cup.
Thanks, Sean.
Sign up for the Sports Geek News at sportsgeekhq.com/SGN.
Thanks again to Michael Brown. You can follow him on Twitter, MichaelB2015. I do remember when I caught up with him in his final couple of weeks at Cricket Australia before he accepted the role, talking about how the Asian Cup could use social to engage the fan base. And as we discussed there, really early on in the process, not many Australians knew about the tournament. I think we've done a great job building awareness, and I think it'll be a great tournament. Looking forward to it. You might also want to listen to the episode 52. Shane Harmon was one of those first people working with the Asian Cup early on as an offsider there to Michael Brown before he went and took the role on at Westpac Stadium. So go back to that and listen to that one, episode 52. And, at this being most likely the final episode of the year, I may put out an episode post-Christmas, but I want to say a big thank you to all of my guests that have been on. 96 guests in total, inching closer to that 100-guest milestone. But please connect with them all. You can go to the page on the website, sportsgeekhq.com/SGP guests. You'll be able to connect with them on Twitter and LinkedIn. People are always asking me, who should I talk to? Who should I connect with? Those 96 people will be the first people that I will recommend because they've been so open in sharing their knowledge and helping this industry grow. I did promise in the show notes to share a little bit of my plans for 2015, and this is one of my plans for 2015, podcasting. Next year, I'm going to push further into podcasting and produce a few different shows in a few different areas and looking to launch a podcasting network around the world of sports. So please join the Sports Geek News mailing list, sportsgeekhq.com/SGN to hear about it first. But I really do think the time is right. I've talked about podcasting as being one of the trends for next year. And I think a lot of that goes to, one, yourselves. People who listen to podcasts are the best advocates for podcasts. So go out there this Christmas and tell your friends what you're listening to and why you should be listening to podcasts. That helps me, but it also helps you. You'll get better content for your earballs. I love that phrase that the guys at the BS Report use. So as I open up my phone here and look at Pocket Casts, it's the app that I use. It's my favourite app. You can sync across multiple platforms, know when you're listening to it. things like Startup Podcast with Alex Bloomberg, formerly of This American Life, putting out great podcasts. Gary Vaynerchuk getting involved with Ask Gary V. Pat Flynn, who is one of the guys that I followed early on and learned a lot about podcasting with his podcasts, the Smart Passive Income podcast, but also Ask Pat. But there's pretty much anything. I'll also include in the show notes, the Slate have just released the top 25 episodes of podcasting of all time, and it definitely shows that it's not new and it's not fresh and all those kind of things. It's been around for a long time, but it's really things like Serial, and the fact that Serial was parodied on both Funny or Die and SNL this week sort of just shows it's going mainstream and more people are doing it. More people are listening to it, and all the studies are showing that more people, once they get into podcasting, are listening to it more. So I'm going to be pushing more into that space, delivering really high quality content that sports fans are going to want. So please, if you're interested to know more, please send me an email, Sean@sportsgeekhq.com. But until then, until that happens for starting out next year, wish you all a very Merry Christmas. Have a happy holidays, a safe holidays if you're traveling. Until then, cheers from me.
Check out which teams work with Sports Geek at sportsgeekhq.com/clients. Find all Sports Geek podcasts at sportsgeekhq.com/SGP. Like the Sports Geek podcast? Find us on facebook.com/sportsgeek. Thanks for listening to the Sports Geek Podcast.